Welcome to Your Town. I'm Chef Wendy Brodie with Art of Food, and my guest today has become a dear friend over the past couple of years, a real foodie, culinary entrepreneur from Chicago, no doubt, who's adopted our town and our area, Linda Calafiore. Calafiore, where did the A come in? Anyway, welcome.
Thank you, Wendy. It's a pleasure.
So, I was so thrilled when we met through a book club that you used to own and start a cooking school, the
Cooking and Hospitality
Yes,
Institute
yes.
of Chicago.
Yes. It was a late night cooking for me, but
That's-
you're no stranger to
No.
that. So tell me, how did you get started in that, and what inspired you to start a cooking school?
Well, that was in the 80s, a while back. At that time, I was working for the State Board of Education, and that was a time when vocational education was very prominently funded, and there was a lot of interest in it. And I was, out of college, you wander around and you get your first job or two, and the next thing you know, you're a bureaucrat. And I was assigned different vocational programs.
Oh.
And one of those, as well as secretarial, auto mechanics, and one of those was the chef program at the Chicago Public School System. And, it always intrigued me, and there was a 2-year wait list for that program. And because, it was not a for-profit institution, it was a Chicago Public School program, they weren't really ready to adapt to marketing needs. And so, at that time, there was clearly a demand if people were waiting 2 years to get into culinary school. So, one thing led to another, and, I met, a short-term partner who helped say, we could do this, we could start a culinary school. And I knew a lot about the administrative aspects of getting approvals, getting curriculum, ultimately financial aid programs. And one foot in front of the other, and we had several just bare bones locations. And then at some time later, this was in 1983,
Yes.
I was able to get my first small business association loan. And then we were in a very fringe neighborhood in Chicago, right next to Cabrini Green. At that time, it was very risky, but people said, what are they doing? The police came by, because, we were a very small staff, primarily women, and the police called us volunteer victims, because we had these huge glass windows looking out on the street. And we started with just like one row of a commercial kitchen, and then we were able to add a second row. And little by little, that was at the start of the 80s, those early 80s were just the birth of the interest in the United States in food. So, I rode that wave and followed it through, and I had the school for 17 years.
I saw that. And how did you, you also had to learn about cooking or be involved with
Yes.
it. And that was a byproduct of all your administrative training.
Right. Luckily, I didn't pick something like auto mechanics, which I knew nothing about. Though, all of those trades. I was thinking this morning, walking my dog, about, all the trades that were so popular. You could go and be a welder and a mechanic, and, the birth of, computers and starting to work on all of those things.
Yes.
Which, then everything shifted to everyone wanted to go to college, and the pressure was on going to college, and all those trades were lost. Though I have heard, in this lately in the political cycle where, people are talking about vocational education again. It does swing back and forth frequently.
Yes. Well, back to the food part of the business.
Oh, yes, and how I got interested, yes.
Well, what interests, did you have certain cuisines you liked? Or?
Well, I really approached it as a business enterprise. So, and I was new, and people were very suspect about who she was and who did she think she is, coming in. But, I did all the right things at that time, meaning I joined every professional organization. I joined the chef organizations, and it was very hard for me to get into that circle, but I would, monthly I would show up for every meeting until people then, several years later, they just,
How do we accept?
Yeah. I mean, they don't remember when I wasn't, a part. I mean, I
Yeah.
offered our facility for all kinds of promotional events and charity events, like how
Right.
that happens. And then, as I was invited to be on different organizations, American Institute of Wine and Food and Slow Food, I mean, that was again, the birth of those organizations. And then I was lucky enough to get on the boards of some of those organizations.
Right.
And you get to, see firsthand, I was able to go all around, I mean, primarily to Italy and France and the United States for board meetings and different, I mean, Slow Food in Naples, I mean, who's going to turn that down? I mean, it was, a fantastic meeting, sitting in the Naples Opera House, with translations going on. It was, I always felt very privileged to be part of that movement.
Well, I want to come back to the slow food and what that really is. I mean, because you hear the term a lot. I know there are different chapters around. I think there's even one here that.
Yeah, I think it's more in Santa Cruz. Yes.
Yeah, okay. No wonder I haven't been able to find it easily. Well, anyway, back to the business model. Did they have a pastry department? How did you run your curriculum?
I mean, we started with a 6-month certificate program, and then eventually we had a 2-year associate degree program. And that was again another struggle. People, we were a for-profit institution, and that wasn't done very often. And part of us being a trailblazer in that was that nobody knew what to do with us. So. I just submitted, I just started submitting all the paperwork for accreditation. And I mean, that means we taught general education and, we had English and geography and math and, put together that curriculum. And we, it was a multi-year process to get those approvals. But I thought it was very important that the credits for our program could transfer to a university or a college.
Oh, I think that's
so.
fabulous.
And it was a struggle because it wasn't done at that time. I mean, the accreditation agency didn't know what box to put us in, but again, it was a matter of getting the battle for the test of time. I mean, I just wore them down.
Now, there's got to be some fun stories about the kids cooking or things.
Oh, yeah, because we also ran a restaurant. I mean, the model that many of the culinary schools use, so that you had young adults and adults, because at the time we had, there were a couple recessions during that period where people had 4-year degrees and yet were disillusioned with being professionals, and everything from accountants to attorneys. They gave it up and they wanted to be they thought it was glamorous. And Wendy, you know how glamorous working 18-hour days are. But anyway,
I see the telltale signs on my hands.
Yes.
And face.
But again, it was a timing issue where there was just a resurgence of interest.
Yes.
So so people were waiting on. Some of the students were waiting on customers, and they were not in a fine dining situation very often. So, I mean, so you always had those kind of mishaps.
So they got to work in the various areas of the kitchen.
Yes,
and then
yes. I mean, the last part was we didn't have externships away from campus because we had an on-site restaurant, so that they had to rotate through that. And luckily, that fringe neighborhood that we moved to became a relatively trendy area, but 18 years later. So it was the River North area in Chicago, so that there was a number of office buildings in the area where people could walk and have a decent lunch for. I mean, I think we had a 3-course lunch for $12. So and it was a lovely place to just come and have a decent meal.
Well, when I entered culinary school in San Francisco, it was based on the Escoffier method and the French cooking. Nowadays, everything's kind of global cuisine and you get everything. what was the curriculum? Was it based on the Escoffier and French cooking?
Well, I mean,
or-
I think when we started, certainly the people who did the curriculum, I mean, everything was at that time French-based and the classic sauces and preparation. But, you know, as we developed, and especially as we developed the 2-year program,
Yeah.
world cuisine certainly entered into some of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's-
And there was just, you know, again, it was the timing, you know, from 83 to 2000 was, you know, everyone's interest around the world
Yes,
was about food.
absolutely.
You know, and French was fighting for their identity, but, you know, California cuisine was really important also.
Yes,
Yeah.
And Chicago had many of the famous restaurants.
Yes. I mean, I actually, again, you know, as I was thinking about our conversation, I was thinking about Charlie Trotter, who's,
yes.
you know, since deceased.
I
But, you know, like that was one of the, you know, when you went to Charlie Trotter's for dinner, that was a really special night out. And I can remember him saying, you know, to some group, when people were talking about the expense. I mean, and then you could go to Charlie Trotter's for under $100 a person, probably.
Wow.
You know, and he said or maybe it was $100 a person, but he said there's nowhere where you can get the kind of investment that you can you know, reap from having a fine dining experience where I think he used the term $50 an hour at that time. And I remember we're talking 20 years ago or plus. Where you can have where you can have an environment that's beautifully maintained, where you have a staff to wait on your every need, you have a delicious meal, and you have someone to clean up. I mean, so you know
that's very well put.
I thought so, and
remember that.
Yeah, and I thought. I mean, you know, you'd have to alter the numbers now, and I
Yes.
thought that is so. You know, appropriate to a dining experience. And, you know, we all go out where, you know, I mean, I run into you at, you know, happy hours at places.
Yes.
And, you know, and you know, we want to have a reasonably priced, you know, delicious something, you know,
Yes.
with a glass of wine. And, you know, not every restaurant experience needs to be 5 courses. And as a matter of fact, I mean, if I'm invited to a 12-course meal now, I mean, I don't even look forward to it. You know, I love I love a delicious 3-course meal, and you know, I mean, we don't want to be.
I think those days are over.
Well, but there's still you know, restaurants that do that.
I mean, I have to
Yeah.
say, if I were at the French Laundry,
Oh,
I'd suffer through that.
Yeah, I know.
would.
But again, I mean, you by the time, you know, you're on course 11, it is kind of you know, a little bit. Your longings.
Well, if they do
yeah.
it right,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
with little tastes. Honestly, it's like being at a cocktail party and
Right,
having
right.
12 different
Yeah.
hors d'oeuvres.
No,
mean,
and we
that's-
and I have a discussion with my sister all the time. My sister and my nephew love going to those elaborate meals, and they know. And my brother-in-law and I are always like, you know, can we like choose, you know, a different path? And that's how I cook too. I mean, like I cook rustically, and that's how I like to eat. You know, I don't want food overly fussed with. Not to say there's anything wrong with that.
No, but again, the cooking schools way back, things really got very elaborate.
Right.
And they started out kind of that way in the country clubs where the garde manger
Right.
portion, you had the turkeys and the hams. It had all this chaud-froid
and there's a place for that. I mean,
Yeah.
and preciously arranged food,
Yes, yeah.
which has got nothing to do with the cooking of food. But you know, I mean, we all love to have, you know, something lifted, you know, in our face and getting an aroma. You know, and it's always fun.
Yes.
But it's not an everyday kind of thing. So. Yeah, so every day, you know, I always long for just, you know, like the rustic food of Italy is probably my favorite. I mean, and that's probably what I, you know, cook mostly myself. Though I've been known to do a few ethnic things from now and then.
Yes, gosh, there's just so much. I mean, you're so talented that I'm thrilled. But you sort of left that food world behind, other than cooking for your friends and book club and whatever.
Well, I was lucky enough to sell my business to the Cordon Bleu schools in 2000.
And they're doing great now.
Yeah, well, actually, they have closed some of their schools.
Well,
yeah.
right, but then didn't Escoffier's grandson has taken those over, and I thought they're being refurbished.
Well, I think in a different way.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's that
I
whole
could have
shifting.
one,
Yeah, it's that whole shifting
Right.
back. But anyway, so as I said, I was very fortunate that they were looking at expanding to Chicago, and it was either do I sell or do I compete against them, and they had a lot bigger machine behind them than I did.
And after 17 years,
yes,
you were ready for us.
Right.
You were
Right.
ready for
So then I stayed in
California.
Chicago for a few years, and then it was, all right, now what am I going to do? And so when I moved to Carmel, which was on a lark, and that was 15 years ago, haven't regretted anything. I really just wanted to put that world behind me. So I really haven't, I kept up my membership with Les Dames de Scoffier, which you are a member here
Yes,
locally.
yes.
Because I had just great professional friends, and I still have some great professional friends back in Chicago that are still own their own restaurants, and when I go back to Chicago, it's so wonderful because they still treat me like I'm somebody important. So and that's always fun when you go to a restaurant,
Yeah,
as you know,
is.
to be recognized and treated well, and when they gather around you and share a meal and invite you out. It's so special.
Well, if anyone is going back to Chicago, besides some of the great restaurants, do you have some names of ones that you like and would recommend?
I have a couple I have some very good friends, if I could
Yes.
do a little
Of
promotion.
course.
Brodie, Kiri Nahabedian, who recently closed her first restaurant in Chicago, Naha, but Brodie is right down the street. And Sarah Stegner has Prairie Grass Cafe up in the northern suburbs, and they're doing the kind of food at Prairie Grass that you can go to every night. Brodie is a little special occasion, French restaurant that is a jewel box of an environment.
Wow.
And those are the things we don't, we really don't locally have, beautiful, restaurants where in the interiors are, there's a lot of investment in the interiors. I guess that model doesn't work here.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think the pendulum's got to swing back. In
yeah.
San Francisco, they're really working on some fabulous restaurant interiors.
And you eat, I was told from a very young age, you're the only person I know that can eat with their eyes, just because I, could just be in awe of, something. And because you have to take in all those senses. But you don't necessarily have to have a beautiful interior to have delicious food. I'm not saying the two are necessary. But
it
that
all helps.
experience, and the whole thing about restaurant is entertainment. I love going to a busy city restaurant and just, sitting and observing. And, if you're late, I don't care, because there's always something going on that's of interest. And it is theater, to put out a delicious meal and have that whole ensemble of personnel and employees, and to have them not miss a beat. As you know, to get, 6 plates out at the same time, and everyone orders something different, and the next table has something else going on. It is really an art form that I think is underappreciated.
Thank you for saying that. I know that, and I'm thinking.
You didn't tell me to say that.
Anyway, thank you so much. I would love to have you on again sometime. You're just so great, and I look forward to our meals with you.
Great,
always.
Wendy. I know that's going to happen really soon.
Yeah. Take care, and thank you.
Thank you.